Well, morning, everyone. I'm Charles Gerald. I'm CEO of the BPIF, and on behalf of the BPIF and our panelists, I'd like to welcome you to day 3 of National Apprentice Week 2022. The national theme for Apprentice Week this year is Build the Future, which allows us to reflect on how apprenticeships can help individuals to develop the skills required for a very rewarding career, and businesses to develop a talented workforce that is equipped with future-ready skills. To that end, the BPIF and BPIF Training are hosting daily webinars aimed at supporting all those involved in apprenticeships, from parents and carers looking to support decision-making, employers looking to build their workforce, and young people taking that first step in their careers. Just looking at the sessions that we are holding and have held, we've had a fantastic week up to now. On Monday, our Managing Director of Training, Carly Lathmore, joined by a group of apprentices, held an inspiring session on the value of a career in the printing industry. And yesterday, our very own Max Walkington, Head of Data and Compliance, talked through funding available to employers to support growing their workforce through apprenticeships. We've got lots more to come, including tomorrow, where Aaron Madar, our Business Engagement Manager, will be discussing apprenticeship recruitment and vacancies, followed on Friday by Carly, who will be summarising the week and discussing plans for BPIF training for the coming months, and there's a lot going on. Today, though, I am delighted to welcome Daryl Danieli, editor and publisher of Print Week, who'll be hosting this panel session, discussing how print has changed through the generations and some thoughts for the future. So, Daryl, over to you, and I will stop sharing my screen. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Charles. First of all, quick apology. Unfortunately, Catherine Hawkins from Berkshire Labels can't join us this morning. She's unwell. So we give her our best. But obviously, we're going to have a fantastic session anyway. So I'll crack on and introduce today's speakers. So first up, we've got Graham Bromley, who's Deputy Managing Director of Hobbs. Graham joined Hobbs as an apprentice, so perfect for this panel, in the print finishing department and served a 4-year apprenticeship. He rose rapidly through the ranks, managing the dispatch department, then bindery, and then pre-press, before taking on the role of works manager and then operations director, and then ultimately his role today, which is deputy managing director. Next up, we've got Charles, of course, as CEO and the host of today's session, the BPIF. You know, he probably needs no introduction, but as everyone else has to have one, it's only fair that he does as well. So first of all, let's not judge him, but he qualified as a chartered accountant and worked in the publishing sector before heading over to his family business, Gerald Print Business, in the late 1990s. He subsequently held leadership roles at print businesses including Southern Print and St Ives, and then set up his own software business before coming back to the wonderful world of print to head the Fed as CEO in 2014. And then finally, we've got Jack Tween, who's Director of Apprenticeships at Apprenticeship Consultancy, DSW. Sorry, Jake. I said Jack, didn't I? This is a bad start, isn't it? He's even got your name on the screen. There's no excuse for this. Jake has 16 years experience of supporting learners, providers and employers in the field of apprenticeships and technical education. Having held senior roles at some of the UK's largest awarding organisations, he is now employed as Director of Apprenticeships at DSW, a leading organisation specialising in the assessment of apprenticeship standards. So panel, welcome. Thanks for giving up some of your time for us today.
Thank you.
I guess we'll start with a big one, really. So no pressure, but you know, what do apprentices bring to print businesses? Because I think that's the topic of today's discussion. I don't know who wants to start. So maybe Charles, it's only fair. It's your session, so you start off.
Well, I mean, they bring a huge range of things. I mean, obviously, enthusiasm. Once they're trained at skills, I think they have an immediate impact on the culture of the business. And looking at our quarterly survey, you know, on a kind of more mundane level, skills and labour are typically sort of in the top 3 of concerns for the UK print industry, particularly at the moment. And so the training schemes and young people coming into those schemes are vitally important.
And Jake, what about you? What are your thoughts?
A whole host of things really across not just print, but I would say every sector of the economy really. There's huge benefits to the apprentice themselves, but also their business that they're working for. The Department for Education publishes data and evaluations on the performance of apprenticeships, and they interview employers as well as part of that. So there's lots of kind of demonstrable return on investment there in terms of retention. Apprentices tend to be loyal and they stay with companies for a longer period of time. They bring fresh ideas and new perspectives. And of course, they've got the support as well of their training provider. So with all kind of modern apprenticeships, for want of a better term. Apprentices, not only are they benefiting from kind of work-based kind of training, but they've also got their off-the-job training as well. So they tend to have a skills coach who's come from industry, who can also act as a mentor and bring kind of fresh perspectives and things. So it's hugely valuable to employers as well as individuals.
Yeah, fantastic. And what, Graham, I suppose you've got from both sides of the fence. You started as an apprentice, but obviously you employ apprentices as well. So what do you think apprentices have brought to your business?
So we have former apprentices at every level through the business. I am certainly not the only one here. Our customer services manager, our manufacturing manager, multiple team leaders, as well as leaders on our presses and our digital presses and software development. In every aspect of the business, we have former apprentices. They, as you say, bring enthusiasm to us. What they get in return is a career path, or the opportunity for a career path. If they show the right dedication and drive, then all things are possible. We expose them very early on to hands-on. They're not sat to one side just watching. They're in and involved very early on with us, and they add real value because they don't want to do the same job forever. And certainly we see that with current intake. They're very keen to develop them, not only themselves but also to try and find better ways of working. So yeah, of course I'm committed to apprenticeships. I am. It's been a fantastic career path, or got me on that career path from the very beginning. And I suppose, to my certain knowledge, we've been running apprenticeships for over 60 years, and we never stopped. We never stopped. So even when they went out of fashion, we kept taking apprentices because we absolutely believe that it's the right way to go, and we see them as senior people in our business going forward.
Well, are there challenges though in terms of recruiting apprentices or actually helping them develop? You mentioned there in terms of the career progression, which I should imagine is incredibly important for people.
What really matters once you've got them, it's about engaging them in what you're doing and what they're doing, and linking what they're doing to what they're learning and where it can take them. In terms of attracting people into the industry, yeah, I mean, print is a challenging one to sell, but once they see it, once they understand it, it's actually very easy. But getting people who've not seen what's all the career opportunities in print is a particular challenge. Yes. Does everybody stick? No, it's not for everybody, but we keep a high percentage of our people. And as Jake mentioned, we length of service, people who stay with us, the loyalty is higher for people who've been engaged for a longer period of time and have seen their careers growing. So.
Actually, and Jake, I guess because you're across multiple industries.
Yeah.
So are there particular challenges in manufacturing sectors like print that you've come across?
Yeah, I wouldn't say necessarily in sectors. I think there are common challenges across all sectors, and the biggest one I think that I hear the most from employers, and the thing that probably puts them off apprenticeships, if I'm honest, is the 20% off the job requirement. But I think there's a lot of misunderstanding actually about what that means, because I think your initial knee-jerk reaction is, oh God, that's a day a week. I can't afford to have somebody out of the office or out off the shop floor a day a week for a year or 2 years or 3 years. But actually, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're out of the workplace. They can be doing work that contributes towards that 20% off the job while they're working. And it's really about educating individual employers, where the training provider can play a real good role in that. And the apprentice themselves recognizing that if they're doing things and they're learning on the job, if they can equate that back to the standard, the apprenticeship that they're working towards, all of that counts towards 20% off the job. It's not necessarily right, you're dragged off and you're sat in a room in a college a day a week. That's really not what it's about.
Yeah, okay. And Charles, in this, you speak to a lot of employers. So what are the sort of common challenges that employers come across when it's to attracting apprentices into the business?
Well, I think a lot of the points have been made. It isn't necessarily easy, but what's been interesting is that particularly as we come out of this pandemic period, we are seeing quite a strong uptick in demand for apprentices. And currently, I think most of the kind of government systems in place to help employers find apprentices are working reasonably well. I wouldn't say it's easy, but they're working reasonably well. And we don't see that as being a kind of acute pinch point at this moment in time. But, I think Jake's made the point, off-the-job training was something that certainly when that requirement came in, we were all concerned about. But again, before that journey starts and before employers even go out and start taking on apprentices, we work as a training provider really closely with the employer to make sure that their commitments are understood. And then actually picking up Graham's point about helping them stick, it's a three-way deal between the employer, between the apprentice, and between us as a training provider. And to be candid, we get inspected by Ofsted. They look at that. They look at whether we're doing that properly. And so we all enter into that together. In terms of sort of overall finding apprenticeships, sometimes there's a sense that people want to go to other more glamorous organizations, the Googles and so on. I think that's a bit of a myth, actually. But we need to continue to work away at what we can do to help engage with schools. So we work with Intergraph to produce a skills, an engagement toolkit to help the industry, for example, lots of different ways, and trying to provide a range of attractive routes in as well. Okay,
and yeah, you kind of expand on that a little bit in terms of how we try and make apprentices more attractive, because it's interesting that you say that there's a lot of interest out there from young people in terms of getting into apprenticeships. But it's a competitive landscape. Just recruiting any member of staff is really tough right now for a lot of industries and a lot of companies. So how can print kind of stand out from the crowd in terms of attracting potential candidates?
That once people come in to see what modern print businesses do, they are attractive, interesting businesses. They're so creative. They provide a good working environment. We have very, very strongly believe that providing a range of entry points and then actually some progressions through with other apprenticeship schemes, so high-level apprenticeship schemes, a career path, all help significantly, actually. And I think it kind of works. There is really high-quality training. I think that apprenticeships not only give great skills to individuals in terms of the jobs that they're typically coming in to do, but again, it's an important part of the training that they're given the kind of wider transferable skills too. And these often chime well with people when they're leaving school and really not certain what they want to do.
Okay. And Jake, what about you, your experience again across multiple industries? Is there any kind of, do you see any particular interests out there that do a particularly good job of promoting themselves or selling themselves to potential apprentice candidates?
Yeah, I think Charles hit on a really important point there, that the relationship, I think, it's a tripartite relationship between the apprentice, their training provider, their employer. From our perspective is the assessment organisation. So the apprentice comes to us at the end. In theory, once they've gone through that gateway and they're presented to us for their assessment, they're deemed as ready. And without exception, it's the training providers that have formed that real engagement with the employer, and the line manager in particular is a really critical stakeholder in this. They're the ones, the apprentices have a better experience, they're better prepared, and they come away with better outputs. So I think employers and training providers that recognise that and promote that invariably do better.
And Graham, is that something you do? Because you mentioned you have a lot of apprentices that work through the business and they're now in senior positions. Are they almost like in terms of talking and engaging with apprentices and luring them into the sector, if you like? Are they a key part of that strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have found thus far that we've been able to recruit good people. The number of people that apply has been lower, but we are getting good candidates, and we've been able to make good appointments that we're very happy with. I think the attraction that they see is that isn't just about ink and paper. It's the digital pathway as well, with the digital printing, the automation, the robotics, and so on. They see here is all really quite exciting. So they can see there that it's not a dark and dingy, but it is about capturing people before, when they don't understand what print is really about. Therein is the challenge. I would say, just going back to the blocks, yeah, the 20% has been a challenge in some cases, but that really is, as Jake said, a matter of interpretation. It's rather like evidence for an MVQ. When you start, most people struggle to understand what is evidence and what is not. But once you tune in to what really evidence is about, we can help our students, we can help our apprentices, and that is very much part of that partnership with in our case, with the Federation as well as the individuals. And it's actually quite straightforward. And what we've done is taken patterns of successful candidates in the past, successful apprentices, and we share that documentation. This is how we recorded that time. Here are the kind of things that and it's not that difficult to achieve that 20%. So that problem goes away. We have to keep banging the drum. One of the things that we've found down the years is actually, so when I came in the business, I was 16. but we often pick up apprentices who are 18 or 19. And that works because some of them have gone on to further education, perhaps become disillusioned with where that's going, or have tried other areas of work, and they're a bit clearer about what they want. So when they come in and they see the opportunities, that's an area that's worked very well for us.
When you mentioned in terms of sharing some of the lessons you've learned from sort of helping people develop, so do you mean share as in within your business, or actually to the wider industry?
So that's within our business. So where we have former apprentices that have met this criteria, their systems for recording their off-the-job training, their systems for recording what evidence they've got and presenting that evidence, and sharing that as best practice within our own team is what we're doing.
Okay. And Charles, and I guess as the federation, you guys can help share that information in terms of make the onboarding process that much more straightforward. Because I guess the bigger challenge is the smaller the company, the bigger the challenge, I guess.
Yeah, and that's a really, really important role for BPIF and BPIF training. And I think actually across lots of different aspects in our industry, one of the things that we seek to do is to make any activity like that easier for an employer. So sharing best practice. We've got so much experience in the training team about what they need to do there. It's really important to us that the employer comes into this with a clear understanding of what their requirements are and what their commitment is, which are not onerous, but it is vitally important. And yeah, so we'll help establish best practice. That's a key part of our role.
Yeah, and Jake, again, that cross-industry position you've got, is there enough sharing of that kind of best practice information across sectors and maybe print specifically, but broadly as well, in terms of the benefits that apprenticeships can bring?
Yeah, I think there is. We can always kind of individually and collectively do more, but there are kind of trade bodies and organisations such as AELP where employers and providers come together and share that best practice. But forums like this as well, I think, are an excellent way. National Apprenticeships Week it's great for bringing people together who ordinarily wouldn't come together. And actually, that's one of the things that I've seen over the years as a real benefit of an apprenticeship, is particularly where you have the apprentice who maybe does some of that off-the-job training away from the place of work, and they're engaging with other people from other businesses. And quite often, say if they're doing a pan-sector apprenticeship, so in leadership, management, business admin, those sorts of things, they might be working with people on group projects and presentations who are from a completely different sector. They might be working with somebody from the public sector. I mean, I'm currently doing an apprenticeship myself. And in my cohort, I've got people working in the NHS, and that sharing of best practice and opportunities is phenomenal. And quite often there's a real stretch there for the apprentice as well, because in order to complete the apprenticeship and to pass that endpoint assessment, they have to be able to demonstrate competence against all of the knowledge, skills and behaviours. And actually, it's very rare that you'll have an apprentice who does all of those things as part of their day job. So that's where that element of stretch comes in. So they'll be exposed to things that perhaps they wouldn't ordinarily have done. And that's not just good for the apprentice and their personal development, but also it kind of uncovers hidden talents in those individuals that maybe their employer didn't know they had.
Okay, actually, an interesting point as well. I mean, and I don't know, is there an age restriction on undertaking an apprenticeship?
There's not, no.
Oh.
Yeah, the only requirement is you need to do a minimum of a year and a day's worth of training. So at the beginning of the program, quite a lot of apprentices are actually 25 plus. And apprenticeships can be used to upskill people to work into kind of a different area of their business. So provided you do that kind of skills scan at the beginning, and if you can determine, okay, this person wants to move into a management role, is a classic one. Okay, well, you do a diagnostic. How many of these management kind of skills do they have? How many of these models and theories do they understand? And if there's enough of a skills gap to warrant that 12 months plus training, they are eligible for that program. It will be funded through the levy.
Oh, excellent.
I was going to say I think that's a really important point just to highlight, in that we're very focused naturally on young people coming into the industry, but actually apprenticeships are open to all and can be in the business already, actually. And I think I can't remember the exact word, but it has to be fundamentally different to any previous qualification you've done. But one of the changes that was made a few years ago was to move away from sort of slanting the incentives towards younger people and to make it open to all. And with, you know, with long careers, that's critically important, actually.
That's really interesting. Essentially, I suppose it's almost like it's an out-of-the-box career development plan for someone, isn't it? Potentially.
It is.
So
I think
there's a massive opportunity.
One of the big drivers for that was the funding reform and the introduction of the levy, because prior to that, it was all funded by the government, by the Treasury. Now it's all funded by those 2% of employers that pay into the levy. They fund the entire apprenticeships program for all employers. And because it's funded by the employers and because it's an employer-led model, I think there is a justification there to say, well, it's up to you, whatever you determine is the best value for money. And if that's actually upskilling existing members of staff, then that's a perfectly valid way for you to use that money.
Okay.
I would say that it's not at all uncommon for people who are already employed in our business to apply for and get apprenticeships.
Yeah.
When we advertise internally and externally. That happens a lot.
Yeah.
And they then have a great way of making their case, because they can prove that they've been here and contributing and so on. It's really quite interesting how often people will do that.
Mm-hmm.
And to pick up an earlier point that Jake made, we've had managers going through management apprenticeships with the Fed. And one of the key benefits of that was the exposure to other businesses. Now, in this case, it was all from print, but in our industry, there are, people come into a business like ours and they think that every print company in the world is the same as ours. And it's only when they meet other people that they realize the realities of the very small to the Super League, and exposes them to knowledge, information, understanding, and experiences that you can't make up in-house. It's excellent in that way.
No, that's great. And actually, that reminds me, because didn't the flexi job apprenticeships, is that something that's actually happened now? I think that was announced last year by the Chancellor. Was that scheduled to start this year, or is that something now?
I think that was the there was originally a scheme for certain industries, particularly in the building trade, where there's a lot of contract work, where I think apprentices work across different employers. It's not something we've seen in this sector, so I don't know whether that's coming down the track. But again, just to pick up the point around sort of diversity of experience, it's difficult to imagine a more diverse range of organisations than what we see in the print industry. There's such a huge range. We spend a lot of time debating what we mean by print, and that is an endless debate. So there is a good mixture of different types of individuals and businesses there. I think the second point is again this point that Graham's made about people within the business then going on to do apprenticeships, or having done one type of apprenticeship, then building on that, say, level 5. And that's something that we feel kind of passionately strong about. It's vitally important for the sector, and we fought pretty hard for it, actually.
That's great. Actually, and Graham, you mentioned there in terms of we've talked about different age groups that can engage with apprenticeships. Are there different challenges when it comes to engaging with millennials or Generation Z, or the different sort of demographics or the age group? In terms of how I think
you have to understand that people work differently, think differently, and have different expectations, and understanding what is in a role that's attractive and what is not. But actually, for us, the key has been about engagement and support. And if people understand where they fit, they understand how this fits into the bigger picture, then they adapt and we adapt to them. So no, it's not been a real problem for us. But yes, expectations are slightly different. But that's okay, because the speed of change in our industry is such that actually we don't want to be doing what we were doing last year. And we need people who are prepared to challenge the status quo, if you like, or that's the way we've always done it. That hideous phrase.
How have you had to adapt, though, in terms of the youngest generation, in terms of 17, 18-year-olds joining the business? Have you had to adapt how you engage with them to make sure you get to their full potential?
I think the answer to that, Darryl, is that we've adapted the way that we communicate and link to our staff anyway, because actually you have to. People need to know more about what's going on. You have to be more transparent. You have to be generally, why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we training people in area X or Y, and where can that lead to, and what are the possibilities? And in an industry that's changing so fast, it is not possible to say, here, we're going to train you for a job you're going to do the rest of your life. So really we're setting them up with skills that are transferable and can be built on, because with the speed of development in digital print, automation, as I say, robotics, it's completely different. And you need people who are able to adapt to that digital age and do it confidently. And that's really what people today bring to us, the confidence in dealing with those technologies that are dominating now.
Yeah, no, that's great. And in terms of, you mentioned flex scheme, but not really right for print, but Kickstarter scheme, that's still running, isn't it? Is that till the end of March? Is it still time for people to get involved with that, or?
I've got a feeling it's closed to new applicants at the moment, actually.
Oh, okay.
We'll double check that, and we'll
yeah.
I don't know if we get it on the chat or put it onto onto the website, but I think it was extended, and I think it then closed to new applicants, and they're processing. They are processing through to the end of March. It's something like that from memory.
Oh, I see. Oh, right. Okay, fine. No problem.
Just because I have got Kickstarters, we've got until the 1st of March. So the referrals have to be in by the 1st of March, and you have to be employed by the 31st of March.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
That clarifies. Thank you.
Yeah. It's nice having experts on the panel, isn't it? It's always good. And in terms of, and this follows on for something that Graham said, in terms of helping people develop, Jake, how important is mentoring to running a successful apprenticeship program within a business? And also, how can people select the best mentors? Because it might not always be, the most obvious candidates.
It's a really good question. So I think the mentoring is absolutely essential. And in many ways, I think the apprentice kind of has two mentors. So they'll have the workplace mentor, which usually just defaults to the line manager. But like I say, that's not necessarily the best person. I would encourage employers to kind of look at who they've got and who they think has the right kind of characteristics to carry out that role, and also has the time to do it, because it's not kind of something that you can do piecemeal. There is a lot of investment there in supporting mentally, as much as anything else, the apprentice to get through that program, because there are times when it does feel like a slog, particularly when you're really busy at work and you've got portfolio building to do and measuring some of you off the job and things like that. And the mentor's there, not just to help that person to develop the skills, the knowledge and the behaviors, but also to help them to get through those tough times. So that workplace mentor is really essential. It's worth noting that it's not just the apprentice that benefits from that relationship as well. The mentor does. They themselves, they form a really strong bond with that apprentice. And I think that's one of the reasons why apprentices tend to stick around for a lot longer than other types of employee. And the other mentor relationship I think that's important is with the skills coach and the training provider. So like I say, the skills coaches tend to be, in the old world of kind of MVQ frameworks, the apprentices kind of had an assessor, a tutor assessor who would come in. And to be honest, a lot of the time that felt a bit like a tick box. You were kind of just coaching somebody through to say, okay, it was kind of dragging the evidence out and putting it in the portfolio. Now with apprenticeship standards, we tend to have talent coaches or skills coaches who come from industry. So they're not there just to tick those boxes and get somebody ready for their assessment. They're there to share with the apprentice their own insights and their own experiences of having carried out a similar role. So the apprentice is benefiting from kind of two mentors really, which is just one of the reasons I think they tend to perform so well.
Yeah. Right. And I guess there's always maybe sometimes a resistance from potential mentors in actually terms of understanding what's involved. I mean, what's the key difference between, say, a mentor and a coach?
It's a good question. So I think the mentor is more about kind of, so the mentor, say within their organization, their firm, say if it's the line manager, is more around, I think, sharing with them their experiences of that industry, but also that business and that organization and their ways of working and their values and things like that. And the coach is very much more directive, because in my experience, the coach and the training provider are a lot more familiar with the requirements of the endpoint assessment than the employer is. So the employers have a key role in developing the apprenticeship. So they'll write the knowledge, skills and the behaviors. They'll develop kind of the assessment criteria. So they'll say, okay, there's going to be a project, there's going to be an interview, professional discussion. But quite often the line managers, I think, are one step removed from that endpoint assessment. And so they're not always the best person to advise the apprentice on how to prepare for that. Whereas the coach absolutely is, because not only do they have that experience from the occupation, but they also have that mix of assessment expertise in there as well. So they will do mock interviews, for example, ahead of the gateway, ahead of the endpoint assessment, and they might record professional discussions with the apprentice, play them back, kind of coach them through, okay, how did you think you performed there? Are there any areas where you think you might need some improvement? And they're very much helping them to prepare for that assessment at the end.
Yeah, okay.
So Darryl, I've said our training coordinators who are out in the field delivering training to apprentices, I can think of numerous examples where they have acted as mentors and providing support, which is not directly related to delivering the education and training, but is an absolute key part of fulfilling that role.
Yeah.
Actually, Graham, I noticed you were nodding while Jake was talking as well. So you too, mentors are a very important part of the process.
Yeah, in our business, we the mentoring actually comes up towards me. And one of the reasons for that is, in my view, is the team leaders, their line managers are very focused on what's happening in their area. And because of our view of these apprentices being people with the potential to move into other areas, you actually need a bigger picture view. And that helps with the apprentices to understand why it's important what they're doing, how these things link together. And so we try and draw the picture for them that allows them to understand where this could take them. Why is it important they learn this? How could that link to their future? What could, how could that be influenced again? So that's our take on it. And it generally works for us. We absolutely rely on the BPIF for the coaching that Jake was talking about, supporting for interview and so on. We're very lucky that all of our apprentices have oodles of scope in their role because of the breadth of the business. And that makes it really interesting that they can go off like the red arrows. There are many different directions they can go. And so for one of our former pre-press apprentices is a software developer for us these days. It's not, he started on that base and he's bounced off in a different direction. Just an interesting example. Software development, print, they don't automatically link in your mind, but there it is.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of print businesses out there that probably do have development teams. That's part of their role, isn't it? A key part of their role in developing, whether they're web to print businesses or just digital printers that are handling a lot of data. So yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the things, and that's one of, I think, our big challenges is kind of highlighting the opportunities in print, because we're almost restricted by the word print. It's possibly one of our challenges, isn't it? So overcoming that and having an opportunity to kind of expand on what the opportunities could be. Sorry, Charles, you're going to say?
No, to say, I think it is a challenge, but I think it's why it's so important that apprenticeships training gives that range of learning and experiences, actually, because careers aren't linear. They're not linear in our industry. They're not linear generally, and probably less so than ever. And so whilst it's really important that they've got that strong technical foundation, it's the broader skills and it's the appetite for learning and the self-belief as well that comes from the apprenticeship training that is so important.
And now's a good time as well to mention to everyone listening in, if you've got any questions you'd like to post to the panel, please just pop them into the chat function so I can sort of pull them out of there if there's anything you'd like to add. One of the things, it's a constant bugbear really, and I don't know if I don't think there's an easy fix, but I'd still like to get your opinion on it. How do we get employers to more engage with apprenticeships? Because I think there's people like Graham and Hobbs that do kind of get it and are very engaged. But I'm not going to lie, obviously we're a publication. If we write about apprenticeships or training, it will get some of the lowest clicks of any article. And it doesn't mean we're not going to write about it because it's incredibly important. But it's clearly it's trying to get the engagement with employers, I think, and broaden it out to those that don't get it and actually need to get it because there's a massive opportunity. How can we kind of engage with those people? Charles, you start us off.
I thought that might come to me first. I think it's a brilliant question. I think also that I don't think we should be too hard on ourselves or too hard on the industry. It may not get the clicks, Darryl, but our industry really does have a strong heritage and a strong track record in really high quality apprenticeship training. And it's interesting to look back over the pandemic because we continued to complete apprenticeships throughout that period, but employers understandably pulled back on taking new recruits in. So the overall numbers that we train dropped, but they've come back quite strongly. And we're pretty certain that will continue into the future. So I guess there's a few things. I think employers will pay attention to what's really important to them, and the skills market is tight at the moment, so they're very aware of the need for that. I think the ability just to poach, which is a pretty poor solution to skills challenges, is probably less than it was. And if you train people, they're more likely to stick around. I think that also we as a trade association have a really important role, and I touched on this before, and I think that's about making it as easy and unscary as possible for employers to look at apprenticeship schemes, to understand properly what would be required from them, and to make it also easier for learners to engage, or potential learners to engage with employers. So making it as easy as possible, and actually making sure we are there and we're front of mind when people do want some help and are thinking about it. So come to us, and yeah, we'd love to help them.
Jake, what would you add? Oh, sorry, Graham, you go.
Just to come in, if I may, there, I think that there are a lot of employers who don't really understand how to use apprenticeships to develop their skills base. I think that to some extent the vast array of so-called apprenticeships that have become available, because every bit of training started to be called an apprenticeship, I think that's hidden what is in this industry, certainly supported by the BPIF, is a very solid, broad base that sets people up for a career in whichever direction they want to go. There are apprenticeships or so-called apprenticeships out there in welcoming people to car showrooms and stuff. It's not, that's not the same. That's not what is delivered with the BPIF in our business. It really is building a solid base on which people can build their careers and provide us with a range of skills and knowledge. What the Federation are doing with us is providing skills that, or information that we don't have within the business. So that is part of that partnership that Jake was talking about. I don't know if all companies really get that, but it's very clear to us and always has been.
I think Jake made a point as well earlier about the relationships, the benefits that the mentors get within an organisation. So actually, it's sending out a signal to the workforce, isn't it? Actually, we're investing in the business, investing in the future talent. Actually, you can be part of that, and they want to stick around to be part of that. So they're not going to be poached. As Charles said, it's a massive false economy, isn't it? Poaching people. But Jake, sorry, is there anything you want to add on that?
Just to mention schools, really. So I think as kind of a federation and a group of businesses, you've spoken very much about kind of, I think, misconceptions of your industry, and I think those same misconceptions and outdated notions exist around apprenticeships as well. So you kind of got a bit of a double challenge there. So I think getting into schools and being able to articulate as kind of passionately as you have today what your industry is all about, I think is a really critical thing. There is a big challenge with schools, though, in that there was a piece of legislation that was introduced probably a couple of years ago now called the Baker Clause, because the government identified that schools were just not, they were very reluctant to, and in many cases actually deliberately avoiding promoting apprenticeships as an option for school leavers, because their incentives were to push them on into sixth form and to go on to do kind of A-levels and things like that for their own stats. And so there's almost been kind of an active willingness to not promote apprenticeships in school. So there has been talk, and I think it's been confirmed actually that Baker Clause is going to start being enforced. So there will be punitive measures on schools that are found to act in that way. So there's a big opportunity there now. There's an incentive there for the schools to start promoting apprenticeships. So I think there's an opportunity for employers to get a foot in the door and to be more active in that space as well.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of businesses and a lot of industries should do, wasn't it? Engage with schools.
Yeah.
I mean, Graham, do you go to local schools, or do staff speak there?
Yeah, we've supported careers events in schools locally for a long time. I couldn't say that we directly got anybody from it, but that wasn't really the point. The point was to raise the profile of the industry generally, and to be able to go in and actually what we were taking was our own apprentices into those sessions, so that people weren't looking like an old fogey like me, but they were talking to people who are young and active and passionate about what they were doing, and the engagement worked quite well. It's a bit harder at the moment because most of these events are remote, but nonetheless we're engaging with a local college right now actually for a similar approach. Yeah, it doesn't take a huge amount of time. There's good help available from the BPIF to support you if you need materials to back that up, but it's well worth the time, I think.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, and Charles, I think you mentioned in terms of the challenges of the pandemic, has that actually created, or do you think it will create greater opportunities for firms that are looking to take on apprentices or apprentices to engage with the sector? Because a lot of people are changing their businesses really as a result of things moving on.
Yeah, I think for various reasons that we probably won't get into now, the labour market has tightened up quite considerably. And I didn't make, I thought about it, but the other point is that typically the skills that we need in our industry do take a bit of time to develop. Actually, you can't go out and just hire someone unless you go and poach, which is a pretty poor way to solve a problem. It doesn't actually solve it. You do need to invest to build that skills base up and look, a year, 2 years ahead. So yeah, there's definitely a very tight labour market at the moment. Apprenticeships are a great solution to that, and government policy across a range of areas is pretty clearly aligned to try to incentivize organizations to invest rather than to sort of to throw money at cheap and quick solutions. And apprenticeships is one part of that. I think sort of other issues such as making it easier to invest in a business and making it more costly to not invest is what's going on, and that's going on in skills too.
Okay. I just noticed that she's just posted in the chat that she attended an APPG event for apprenticeships last night. Yeah, out of the 15 or so apprentices that spoke, only one had been given apprenticeship information at school. So that's interesting. That kind of goes back to what you were saying, Joe.
I feel for the schools a bit. Teachers are under immense pressure. Actually, I think we've tried very hard to engage with schools with varying degrees of success, partly because they are under such pressure. I think the Baker clause that was referred to will help. And I think we've got a role to play again in helping employers understand what best practice looks like when you're engaging with schools, how to organise visits. We've got all those resources to help. And what we've also done back in the world when we were meeting face-to-face and having fairs, we would kind of coordinate a print space to do all the kind of legwork and hard work for then employers to come and support at employment fairs. And that worked really well. And what's interesting is that because of the nature of print and the fantastic products we produce, we have really, really high levels of interest and footfall from lots and lots of young people, but people of all ages, just fascinated by what print can do because they just hadn't thought about it in that way. So they're a good route, actually.
Yeah, that's great. Excellent. I'm conscious of time, so I need to wrap up soonish. I just want to ask, I'll go through all of you one by one. I'll start with Graham, really. In terms of what would be the one piece of advice you'd offer to an employer who's looking at maybe taking on an apprentice for the first time?
Okay, so based on our own experience and the way that we work, it would definitely be looking at a long-term placement. It's not a short-term fix, but we get value back. So that where people worry about the cost of an apprenticeship or the cost of training someone, the risk of losing them, we don't lose very many, and they are paying back throughout their apprenticeship. They are earning their way. They are building their experience. So it's not expensive. But what you get back at the end is someone with the potential to do so much more in anywhere right across the business.
Nice. And do you think you really need to look at your own business then in terms of if it's a long-term decision in terms of the business needs, not just today but tomorrow as well, before you kind of go down that? So you're getting the right candidates in, really.
I guess so, Daryl. I think because we've trodden this path so many times, we're quite clear about why we're doing it. So I don't go around that loop, but I think it certainly helps if you understand. If you pick up the point that Charles made a little earlier about the availability of resource, you need to be resource planning well in advance now. It's no good saying we've got a problem next week. It's what is the problem you're going to be facing in 2, 3, 4 years, and how do you build the skills? And apprenticeships absolutely fit that bill. This is where you can bring people in and develop the most relevant skills.
Yeah, that's great. So Charles, and what are your thoughts in terms of piece of advice to employers?
If you hear all sorts of sirens in the background, I apologise. The joys of being in central London. Well, firstly, I would say to employers, if you're thinking about it, kind of go for it. But before you go for it, come and talk to us or an organisation like us. But what we will do, we are not just a training provider, but we're a trade association, and that means that we are strongly focused on trying to do what's right for employers in the sector. As a training provider, we have a very strong vested interest too in making sure that the journey that started stands the best possible chance of being completed. And that often means that we will have a conversation and say, we think it's a brilliant idea you want to take on an apprentice, but these are the things that we would help you get in place or need to think about before we actually push the button and launch the process. So sort of honest, open conversation, but more than anything, yes, you know, if you are thinking about it, well, take some action, come and talk to us.
I just want to ask that, have you had to have some frank conversations with companies to say, actually, look, you're not in the right place now, or you know, you need to get into, this is what you need to do, these are the first steps, and then
we wouldn't just sort of throw our hands up and walk away, obviously. But we, and you know, it can be slightly, it's quite rare actually, but it can be slightly tricky. But it's saying, yeah, we think that there are some things that perhaps ought to be done first before one goes down that journey, actually. Because it's so important. The government want to see money spent well, they want to see high quality outcomes. Ofsted come in and want to see progression, they want to see people complete what they've started, they want to see people complete on time. We have, you know, we're held to account for that, so there will be some honest conversations.
That's great. And Jake, Jake, what about you? What one piece of advice would you give?
Along the same lines of what Charles said, really, is get it right at the start, build the solid foundations, make sure it's the right program for the right apprentice, that the commitment's there from everybody involved. So the training provider, the apprentice and their employer, in setting really clear roles and responsibilities and kind of commitments at the beginning. I've made a point earlier that there's a real opportunity there for the apprentice to get involved in stuff that they perhaps might not typically do, because they're going to need to demonstrate competence against the full range of knowledge, skills and behaviours, and they'll be tested against them all at the end. So where I see apprentices who've struggled when they get to us, when they get to the end point, is where they've had that commitment at the start, but then the day job took over and actually they haven't had exposure to that part of the standard. They're going to really struggle to get through their assessment. So understanding what those requirements are, committing to meeting those requirements, and then sticking to that commitment is really, really important.
Yeah, that's great. Brilliant. Yeah, that's it from me. And so that's, well, fantastic. Thank you very much, Charles, Graham, and Jake as well, for your really powerful insights there. It's a really interesting session. I'm going to hand back to Charles now, but there are some other sessions coming up for the next couple of days, which I'm sure Charles will mention. And I understand as well that the sessions that have already taken place are going to be available on demand. So if there's anything you missed, you know, you want to catch up on the National Apprenticeship Week sessions that BPRF's organised, just go over to the BPRF website. But thank you, panel. It's been really interesting. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope you have audience. Back to you, Charles.
Darryl, thank you very much for chairing the panel, and to Jake and Graham too. Really interesting discussion, and I think we could have gone down all sorts of rabbit holes for hours. Actually, it's a fascinating area to talk about. So I really appreciate that. Yeah. So just to wrap up, I'd like to thank Darryl, as I said, and all the panel. It has been a really insightful session, so it's great. It's been a pleasure to be part of the panel. Actually, we'll be sharing a recording later in the week on our website. Just a reminder, our next session, I'm going to try and click on one screen. No, lost it. There we are. So our next session tomorrow is on apprenticeship recruitment and vacancies, and that begins at 10 o'clock in the morning, and there is still time to register. So we hope to see you there. Beyond that, really, thank you everyone who's joined us to listen to the discussion today. If you've got any questions, please do get in touch with us. And as I said, if you're thinking about taking on an apprentice, then take action and come and talk to us. Thank you to the panelists once again, and look forward to seeing as many people as possible tomorrow. Thank you.